What's up, Geek Link? Well, today it is Thursday by my count, and now we are on to the next movie, Slender Man. Yes, if you're thinking of, for those of you, yes, I'm talking about that Slender Man. For those of you who don't know who Slender Man is, well, he's actually a creation that happened on the internet. It was, as I recall, part of a Photoshop contest, which is like a more of a horror type of theme to it, in which somebody started photoshopping a picture of a guy with no face and in a tuxedo, and just sticking him in the background of some last known photographs. And it did fairly well. In fact, it became kind of a phenomenon. First, people would just Photoshop him in other pictures, and then it just grew and grew to a point where he has a game that has actually been featured on IGN. And on top of that, now he has a movie, which was actually funded by fans of the character on Kickstarter. So that brings us to today, where I found the whole movie and I've watched it, and I gotta tell you, so far it's the scariest movie I've seen so far out of all the movies this week. Hey guy, well, here's keeping fingers crossed for the next movie, but I don't know if it's gonna do it. But yeah, it was actually really scary, and a lot of scenes, especially when waiting for Slender Man to show up. It actually understands psychology really well. Well, it's like going back to why I hate movies that depend on jump scares, is they're not memorable. They don't stick with you. You get the jump scare, and then after that you're laughing about it, which if you're trying to make a true horror movie experience, you should not be laughing immediately afterwards. A lot of it is the build up to the scare. There are jump scares, they just happen just like that. But with this movie, I think it understood the psychology really well, in that it builds up to a scare. Like the movie will be going, first it will become nighttime. You'll be like, oh, here it comes. And then all of a sudden you'll see like a little something small, like a flicker in the camera, because part of the whole mystique of the character now is when he starts getting close, the camera will start fidgeting and doing really funky stuff, and then all of a sudden, boom, he hits you, and the entire time you're waiting for it, and it's like, oh, come on, and boom, it'll get you. And it had my heart racing just from the sheer anticipation. So good on Super Movie Brothers, the company behind this. They actually did a really good job with it. Now here's the tricky thing with making a movie starring Slender Man. Now, for those of you who don't know the character, there's no personality to him. He doesn't move. It's like he doesn't talk. He doesn't react. In fact, most of the instances you see him, he's usually just standing there and not doing anything until and then suddenly you die. Hey, if you're around him for too long. Maybe you might see him stretch out his arms, but that's about it. So the question is, how do you interact with him? You're not going to have a back and forth like you would like a Freddy Krueger. You're not going to see him react to stuff like a Jason Voorhees or anything like that. So how do you make a whole movie around the character? Well, I think they figured out a way, and that's with essentially we have three main characters. One we see right off is a guy whose son was taken by Slender Man. And for whatever the reason, he believes that by kidnapping children and sacrificing them, in a sense, to Slender Man, he's going to get his son back. It's the only thing that drives him on. So we actually see him kidnap a few kids. And the next character is actually a detective who is hired to find this guy, which once again also works. And finally, a brother and a sister team who've just been stumbled onto the mystery of Slender Man. And slowly but surely, all these three teams come together, and it leads to a pretty suspenseful climax. And, you know, Slender Man is right in the middle of it. Who's going to survive is the big question, and it's handled very suspensefully well. And watching this film, as well as getting a little bit scared, it was like really cool to watch too, because this is a up-and-coming company, and they do a really good job. I mean, you're not going to see mind-blowing special effects. You're not going to see $1 million of production value, but for what they have, it works. And it proves that sometimes the simplest measures make for a memorable experience. And so Super Movie Brothers should really be applauded for what they do with this movie. For the most part, I really enjoyed this story. It worked really well. But there are a few things, just a few tiny things, and that should be addressed. And I think they'll learn from this experience. One of which, there are a few scenes where they have an issue with the mic, especially one scene in particular where you can tell they're using a directional mic. That's essentially a mic that gets the biggest signal from like one direction. There's a scene where the girl is tied to a chair, and you can tell the mic is on her. Meanwhile, the first character, the kidnapper, who has captured them at this point, is walking around them and talking. And unfortunately, since they're using a directional mic, you can barely hear him. And you want to listen to him because he's starting to talk about Slender Man. So you turn it up, but here's the thing, the girl will every now and again start screaming to the top of her lungs. And yes, it does accentuate the fact that she's scared, so kudos to her for that. But it's also killing my eardrums and making my neighbors want to call the cops because I've turned up the TV so hard now in order to hear what the guy's saying because he's nowhere near the mic. There are a few instances of that where you can't hear a guy and then cut to the next scene and the volume is normal and you'll have to adjust. A few scenes like that, but it didn't really take me out of the experience per se. Also, the annoying thing, because this is presented in a lost footage type of scenario. The thing that unfortunately you have to work around and try to explain every single time you do one of these lost footage movies, is you have to explain why they're carrying a camera at all times. And in this one, since there are three main characters, while I did like that, we have to go through three silly explanations as far as to why they're carrying around a camera, especially the scenes where it makes no sense, and after a while it gets a little ridiculous. It's something that every lost footage movie has to struggle with, so it's, what can you do? And so like I said, these are minor nitpicks, but when you're just seeing them a lot, it sort of gets glaring that, yeah, this is a movie, and you're trying to lose yourself in the illusion that this is footage that was found. Another thing is there are a few moments where they used sound, like background noise, and it does make the effect scarier. It did make me think that, oh, Slender Man's gonna pop out of nowhere, but no, it's nothing happened. And the end result is I'm reminded that I'm watching a movie. You see, this is supposed to be lost footage. This is supposed to be footage that was found and that I'm watching it. So when I start hearing background noise like it was a movie, it takes me out of the experience. So that's like the biggest issue I would have. Aside from that, there are a few instances where the camera angle was really bad, especially the shot at the end in the car. I didn't know what I was looking at. It was mostly dark. I don't know why they kept it in the film. Maybe because they just couldn't get enough lighting for the shot and they gave up. Aside from that, I also want to say it's probably the best instance of technology being used. They actually have a really scary scene involving Google Talk of all things in it, and it's done really well. And as well as tablets and the computer and whatnot, though we do get the unfortunate event where where we have to see them try to record a computer screen, which is never good, which never works. So unless you're using a video capturing device and just pasting it in there. But aside from all this, it wasn't bad. The actors were actually really trying, and the girl especially in the scenes where she's frightened, it actually really did work. And the serial killer, or not the serial guy, wasn't so much a serial killer. The first character who's kidnapping the kids, despite the fact he's doing this horrible thing, you can kind of understand where he's coming from. Not saying that I would do it, but the acting wise, it really worked. As far as the scary movie goes, like I said, it's fun. It works. They successfully make a horror movie that isn't that bad for some, especially for something you can see on YouTube. And as far as replayability, I'm going to show it to my wife as soon as she gets home. So yeah, I would definitely recommend taking a look at it. You can't really buy it. You can't really rent it. So I would recommend you go watch it. It's actually a really fun movie. It's only an hour and 18 minutes, and I thought it worked for what it did. All right, folks. We got one more movie to go, and we saved, hopefully, the best for last. Curse of Chucky. Yes, I said that we'd be doing new stuff, but guess what? This came out in 2013. I get to watch one of my classic horror movie heroes come back in Curse of Chucky. Not Bride of Chucky, no. Curse of Chucky. Also co-starring, interesting fact, the voice of Chucky's daughter in the main role. I'm very curious to see how that works. So tune into the Geek Link. I'll see you on Friday. Happy Halloween, guys.